Hello guys and welcome to my channel once again. First of all, I wanted to thank you all because my recent video just got 50 views at the time of recording, and I just think that's crazy and I'm very excited for the support. So first of all, I wanted to thank you all. Once again, if you have any doubts, everything, just hit me and I'm going to be responding as soon as possible. And we are continuing with my series. We're going to be at the start of the videos seeing what we're going to be studying. So if you're interested, then you're going to know right away at the start of the video. So let's move on. So basically we're going to be having this kind of slide at the beginning of the videos, so that you're going to be seeing basically what the session is going to be about. And in this specific section, we're going to be covering two aspects that I think that are very important just to understand how .NET works. And in my recent video, I said that .NET Core is used basically for two main purposes. One, for building server-side rendering applications, and also it can be used to build API-empowered websites, and also among other things, but these two might be the most common ones. So in order to understand what server-side rendering means, then we need to first see what basically means a static and a dynamic website, all right? And now we're going to be studying the two main categories of websites. So we're going to be seeing the static first. So basically, a static, or also called simple website, is when a developer uploads a final, so to say, ready to be served files of a website onto a web server. So in simple terms, basically a web server is a computer that is going to store websites, all right? And it's going to return those websites when the client or the user requests them. So for example, if you imagine when you type google.com, that is going to make a request to a specific web server that is holding those pages and those websites. And as soon as you request that specific URL, then this computer understands these URLs and is going to return to you the specific HTML, CSS, JavaScript images files for that corresponding website. So as soon as you request google.com, then you get a response that basically is the logo of Google with a input in which you can search for the thing that you are going to be interested in. So basically the web server knows that that specific template is the thing that you are requesting for, all right? So in this web server, simple or static websites just store these files, which are HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and more. And then later, when the request is made, the server is going to extract those files and send them to the browser so the website can be rendered, all right? There is no more work on the server side, and also there is no application running whatsoever. So as you can see, there are just two steps: uploading the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript that you can see in here. And then basically these are stored in a place which is called a web server. And when you make a request to that specific place, then it is going to return these files to the browser. So the browser is going to be able to render them accordingly. All right, so I think that I can give you an example of a website that I built, so you can have a more clear idea of what I am talking about. All right, so basically what you are seeing here is my portfolio. If you want to see some of the projects that I have built, some courses and stuff, then feel free to play around my site. You can see the URL in here. I'm going to also attach it to the description of the video. And in here at the end of the projects, I have 3 of them that are just about static websites. There are also 4, this one too, Omnifoot, so you can go through them. But what I want you to understand is, for example, we can see this one. you can click on the demo, and this is going to make a request to this specific URL. So basically this project contains HTML, CSS, and JavaScript files, and when we make a request to this specific URL, which a web server understands, it is going to return to us everything that it needs to render this specific website. All right, I can maybe show you the structure of this project. Okay, so basically what you can see in here is the structure of the project. All right, so what I want you to focus on is that it has a CSS folder with the files regarding the styling. It has also some images. It has this Sass. I don't want you to focus on that right now. It's simply a library that we can use to build CSS files in a more organized way, but I don't want you to focus on that right now. We also have the so-called markup, which is the HTML file. So basically, this HTML file with the images and the CSS are stored into a web server, so that whenever I make a request to this specific site, then basically the web server is going to retrieve those files that you just saw and then send them to the browser, and the browser will know how to render them and create this specific website. All right, so that's mainly the process that these requests and responses go through, and that's basically what a static or simple website is. All right, so as you saw, this is a static website. You can go for this kind of approach when you need a basic website that does not need to, for example, interact with something in your database. You don't need to persist data. Also, you don't need to have login functionality so that you can store the user somewhere safe and then render the website differently for every user. So for that kind of behavior, then you will need a dynamic website. But for now, if you just need to build, for example, a website or a blog, or for example, some page to promote your company, things like that, that does not need any kind of behavior like the one I explained, then it will be more intelligent to go through a static approach, because it is going to be easier to develop, it is going to be faster also, and you don't have to worry about other kind of things that a dynamic approach needs to have in mind. All right, and so if you need just some markup, HTML, some styling, and some effects with JavaScript, then a static website is going to cut it, and you're going to be saving a lot of effort and time. So now we're moving into dynamic websites. So basically, these kind of websites have a database that you can see in here. Also, they have an application running, which can be, for example, in this case, .NET Core application. We can have a Node.js application. We can have a Golang application, all right? That it is going to fetch some data from the database. And also it has some business logic. And with all these factors, it is going to build in the server the HTML, the CSS, and the JavaScript required and send them to the browser. All right. So for example, imagine Amazon. So if I go to the Amazon.com page, for example, /cart, so to say, so that I want to access my shopping cart, then it is going to say, okay, who is trying to access the application? It is going to say, all right, it is Carlos. So it goes to the database, fetches all the information for me. It says, okay, he had a couple of shoes in his shopping cart and also a bicycle. So it is going to fetch that data. It is going to build the layout for me. So it is going to say, okay, you had in your shopping cart a couple of shoes. It is going to have a bicycle too, with the corresponding amount. So it is going to be a total of $100, something like that. So it first needs to go through that process of fetching the data, and also building the layout, and then it is going to send all the files to the browser so the browser knows how to render them. Alright, so now if maybe you are more of a intermediate or advanced developer, you might be thinking that, alright, but with JavaScript we can build dynamic content, right? Because we can use JavaScript to manipulate data, to so to say make DOM traversing, changing elements and stuff like that, making API calls, and yeah, that's totally true. But the term dynamic in here does not is not the same that dynamic content. All right, the key difference between a static and a dynamic website is where the content is created. For example, in the static approach, basically when we first fetch the data or the files for a specific website, it is only fetched once, and then there is no other interaction with the server whatsoever. So for example, when I require the web page that I showed to you about my website, then when I enter the URL, then that made a request to the server, and then the server sent the files required to render the page, and then that's the only interaction between the client or the browser and the server. And that is a static website. That's just the first interaction of sending them files, and that's it. Now the browser, the client, is in charge of rendering the data. But now in the dynamic approach, the difference is that there's a application running on the web server, and that every time that I make a request to a specific page, for example, Amazon /users, for example, that is going to make a request to the web server. The application is going to build the markup. It is going to build the HTML required based on some conditions, and it is going to send all the files required to build that specific page, which in this example was /users. Then, for example, if another request is made for the other example that I said before, like Amazon shopping cart or something like that, then that means that there is another request going back to the server. The server is going to build all the HTML required, and then it is going to send again the page to the client. So there's basically that back and forth communication. The client requesting the pages to the server creates them based on the routes, based on some other conditions, and then sends the result to the client. Meanwhile, a static website is where basically the files are sent once. All the files required to build the site are sent once, and then the client is in charge of rendering the data. All right, without going into more intermediate or advanced concepts, like you can use a framework like React or Angular that they run in the browser or in the client, and those frameworks are in charge of, for example, helping you rendering data dynamically, making some cool things, but all the files are sent just once to the client, and there is no more interaction between the client and the server, and there is no application running on the web server. So that's the key difference between the both of them. It might be fuzzy at first because they are just concepts, they are just things that maybe you are imagining, but as soon as you jump into code, we are going to be understanding more and more what this really means. So everything is going to fit into place, so don't worry. So before, these two were the only approaches that we had, which were the static versus the dynamic ones. And now, because of how powerful browsers have become, then we have another approach called the API approach, which is personally my favorite, and we're going to be understanding the difference between the two of them. So first, in our server-side rendering approach, it's basically what we saw. We have a database and also an application that is going to access that data. It is going to also manipulate that data with some business logic. All right, it is going to, for example, check some conditions and do some kind of things. And once it is ready, it is going to build the website based on a template. So it is going to build on the server the HTML, the CSS, and the JavaScript, and then send those files to the website based on the request that was made, and finally the browser is going to render the result, which is basically the flow that we studied earlier. All right, so there's nothing different in here, but now we're going to study the API approach, which personally, as I said, is my favorite because you separate like the responsibilities. So we can use basically .NET Core just to prepare the data, all right, and then use another framework like React to render that data and create the website. So basically now the application is not in charge of building the website. It is just in charge of preparing the data and sending that to the browser. That's its only responsibility. And now the creation of the website relies completely on the client or on the browser. All right. So as you can see in here, in this kind of approach, we use the application to access the data in our database, as we said before. All right. Then with some business logic, as we also said before, we're going to manipulate the data, check some conditions, do some stuff. And when we have our data prepared, then we're just going to send that data to the browser. All right, we're not going to send the website, the whole website, like in a server-side rendering approach. So we just send the data. We're not sending HTML, say CSS or JavaScript. We are sending just the data in a format that both the server and the browser or the client can understand, which is basically called JSON, or which is basically what we use nowadays. So this is basically a format in which the client and the server can communicate, and in this kind of approach we just send the data. All right, now the third step is that the browser receives the data and we use a framework to build the website. So now the responsibility of building the website resides on the client and not on the server. All right, so we have a framework like React, Angular, or Vue that is going to obtain that data that we send to the browser, use it to build the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and then it is going to render it. All right, so that's the key difference, and maybe it can be a little fuzzy right now if you haven't seen it in action. But the main difference is that the website in the server-side rendering relies on the application. So the application is in charge of obtaining the data, building the website, and sending the website to the browser. But in this API approach, we obtain the data, we just send the data, and then the browser is in charge of building the template, or so to say, building the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and then rendering it, which I like better because I think that with these kind of frameworks that were built specifically, for front end and for the client and the browser, as React or Angular, we have so much flexibility to work with. All right, so that's my personal favorite approach. But as with the .NET Core, we can follow those two approaches, not only the API approach but also the server-side rendering approach. Then I want to teach you both so you can have tools to build your own applications and solve the problems with maybe that technique that most suits the problem that you're trying to solve. All right, so we're going to see both approaches, and I hope that the difference is crystal clear. If not, please feel free to ask your doubts, your questions, but also I think that it's going to become more and more clear once we jump into the code and see the differences between the two of them. All right, and now I would like to wrap up with a summary. So we basically saw the differences between a static and a dynamic website. Also, we saw what is server-side rendering and also the differences between this kind of approach and the API approach. So with .NET Core, as I said in the last lesson, we are able to build those two approaches, the server-side rendering, so basically building the website in the server, in the application, and then sending the website to the client or to the browser. And also we can build just web APIs, so we just prepare the data and send the data to the browser. So the browser is the responsible for building the website and rendering it. All right. So with this kind of knowledge, I think that we can move forward. I think that now it is time to understand how .NET works, how .NET receives this kind of requests, and how this application processes the requests. And that is what we're going to be seeing next. So I hope that this lesson was useful for you. All right. Please let me know if you have any doubts, any feedback. I'm all ears. I want to improve every day, so please leave me your comments and feedback, and I will try to reach out as soon as possible. And also thank you for the support and the views and the likes and the comments and everything. And I see you in the next one. Thank you.